8:30 yesterday compared to 8:30 this morning. Nothing's gonna change.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming. I'll call the July 15th Ellis County Commission to order. All those that are capable, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Bob, you can call roll.
Commissioner Neil Younger,
Present.
Chair Michael Burgess,
Here.
Commissioner Nathan Liker.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay. Changes or amendments to the order of business? We have one executive session at the end of the meeting. Prior minutes, any changes or amendments needed?
Prior minutes look good.
Look good.
Okay. Consent agenda.
I'll move to approve consent agenda items A through G.
I'll second that.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second on the consent agenda. Any discussion or changes?
Nope, I have none.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 0. Passes 3-0. Issues for persons not on the order of agenda. Anybody speak to the public? Okay. Monthly department report. Any comments from the commissioners at this point?
No?
Okay.
I'd just like to highlight EMS. Looks like they're still averaging 10 runs a month. They've been doing that for at least ever since I've been on the board. So.
Keep them busy. First item, jail painting. Gregor.
Good morning.
Morning.
Greg.
Morning.
Herbert, Buildings and Grounds, bringing to you a proposal to repaint the jail. It's been 10 years since we opened the jail and gets a fair share of abuse. And in the RFP, we stated for epoxy paint, which is a more durable paint, easier to clean, hopefully lasts longer. I sent this out to 3 different contractors in the city, and one responded, JDR Painting, for $36,194.78. Do you have any questions?
I just see if Scott's gonna furnish all the inmates in there with a brush, but. Uh-huh.
I don't really have
Aye.
any questions.
Uh,
It's been 10 years. I'll move to approve PO 7932 to JDR Painting for painting in the jail.
I'll second it.
You got a motion and a second on the table. Any discussion or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
No opposed. Passes 3-0.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Greg, one question, I guess. Any idea when they wanted to start that? I know they're going to coordinate with Scott.
Yeah, that's more of a Scott question.
Okay.
Schedule.
Scott Brown, Ellis County Sheriff. I think we're going to look towards the end of fall here, kind of the winter, so not through the summer, obviously, because we may have to pop some hatches depending upon odor. We're going to monitor that, and then we will coordinate with some of our surrounding jails in case we need to house out for a duration of time while it's being done. And I don't know if you've seen the numbers are climbing in our jail as predicted. They're in the 60s, so we will be housing a few out when we take that on, if it continues. So, anyway, that's kind of the game plan, and it's much needed. So thank you, guys.
Okay,
Thank
thank you.
Capital improvement projects, discussion regarding future capital improvement expenses. Darren.
Morning, Commissioners. Darren Myers, County Administrator. I might make a suggestion anytime that we have a future budget topic to have Greg come up and speak. That's might set a record for how fast the project was approved. But next discussion here is different capital improvement projects. As the Commission knows, we have been discussing several of these projects over the course of the year. And at one point, the Commissioners suggested to possibly look at considering doing a bond to help fund some of these projects, as these projects are upcoming. They are needed, just don't know as to when. For the case, in regards to the courthouse HVAC, it's currently functioning. However, it is getting older, so it to the point where we're spending more than $20,000 a year in regards to those projects. Sorry, I forgot to switch the page here. So it's a matter of time when those need to be done. Doing a bond could potentially put us on a schedule for us to replace some of these different units, instead of waiting for something to fail and then not having the money available to do those projects, and then having to bond out and have unbudgeted expenses on top of that. So in the course of the budget process and considering the overall budget that we have, being able to plan for these expenditures, put it into our budget is a better process. So 4 different projects to consider is the one that has been discussed for several years now is the courthouse, or the law enforcement center. As the Commission knows, the Hayes PD is moving out in around August of 2026. And with that comes kind of some cosmetic changes, moving a couple walls and everything to make it a little bit more efficient for one department to use, instead of it being split up into 2 different departments between the Sheriff's Office and the Law Enforcement Center and the PD. When we did do that project back in 2013, 2015, there was some work done on that main floor of the facility to better utilize the space. But a large part of that project, of that sales tax back then when that remodel was done, was to expand the jail, which is not, this project would not do nothing for the jail. And then the other large portion of that project was to renovate and do HVAC work and everything at the courthouse itself. The second project for consideration is the EMS facility over in Ellis. As the Commission knows, that is an old building. I believe one commissioner went over and took a look at it. Several issues with that. We have some water intrusion due to draining, the way it's also set. The age of the building it's fairly small for 2 personnel to be into, as well as the new trucks that are being ordered don't necessarily fit into the building, which is quite a big of a project there too, or problem to consider. We did look at grants to expand that, or to do a facility, and those grants have not returned back for the one that was suggested to us to the state for that type of category of a grant project. The third project to consider is replacing some fan coil units here at the admin building. There's about 110 overall. We've got that narrowed down a little bit more with a meeting yesterday. If we were to do a bond in such a fashion like this, and doing everything at once, where you would replace all fan coil units at one time, we have some cost savings that could be realized if we did a bond and did it all at once. Estimated savings of just over $300,000 by not splitting it out over several years and having 3 to 7% cost increases every year for that. And then the last project to consider is the courthouse HVAC, which we've kind of talked about already. We did discuss that a little bit more. That is a VRS system that is failing, and we're going to do some more acid tests, I believe is what they called it yesterday, to see if that's what, when the units fail, they put acid into the system, and then it basically starts corroding everything, and you can't flush it out, you can't replace it, you basically have to remove and start completely over. So that's one part of it. The other part is it's just completely, it's not sized appropriately, and then when the weather reaches a max or a minimum, so if it gets below basically 10 degrees, it becomes less and less efficient. It doesn't produce heat. Thus, we have to shut the courthouse down for sometimes multiple days because there's not enough heat in the facility to keep the building warm. Thus, on the opposite end, it doesn't, once it gets over a certain max temperature, it doesn't always function appropriately. However, due to the size and the construction of that building being limestone and concrete, it's easier to cool it than it is to warm it in the winter. So those are several projects there as part of this bond consideration that would be highly, I wouldn't say catastrophic, but if some of those, if the courthouse system failed, we would be in a world of hurt because we'd have to relocate courts, we would have all their attorney staff, find a courthouse elsewhere, we'd have to be transporting inmates, we'd have to be transporting jurors if there's a jury trial. So it's not like there's not another courthouse down the street in Ellis County to start working out of. But I'll kind of stop there with the actual projects themselves, because I know the commissioners are well aware of those different projects themselves, and then kind of shift it to the thought of a bond. The bond could be done, and we could have it set up in multiple ways, so that way it actually wouldn't impact the 2025 or 2026 budget, depending on the timing of when we would actually take the bond out and set up the first payment. The chart that I did put in here is just an estimate on what a $5 million bond would be, and the rates that I did have listed in here are actually about 2 months old, and those rates have dropped down just more than a quarter of a point. So interest rates are falling. They are continued and trended to be falling over the next year or so. However, when you look at the other side of that, if we were to actually bond out the money, we would actually have that money sitting there, and we would gain interest until those projects started. So we would gain interest to offset the interest that we'd be paying on the bond, which should be more. We would gain more interest rather than the interest we would actually pay in on the bond. But those interest rates, when the bond interest rates go down, the financing rates go down for when we put it in the bank. So the earlier we could capture that money and put it in the bank, the higher yield we would get on that interest rate in the bank until we started spending through those projects. There are several ways we could fund this over the next couple of years until the other bond expires in 2030, which then one could offset the other and really have minimal impact as we move through the basically from 2030 to 2040 for the final 10 years of that bond. But that's kind of a future discussion for the actual payments in 2030, but I'll kind of leave it there and see if there's any commissioner questions that I can answer before I get into any other detail.
These are just 3, maybe 4 of the kind of biggest, hottest topics that we're currently looking at. Is there anything else that's kind of underlying on capital improvements that we're looking at?
If you look at your budget book, I don't know, we just got that over the weekend, but in Fund 6, just like we have a 10-year capital plan for roads and bridges, the 10-year capital plan for buildings and infrastructure is also 10 years. Greg's done a great job putting that out, but there's a lot more projects. They're just smaller amounts than what a bridge costs, some of them. But we only put away $250,000 a year for these projects. So if you were just to look at the courthouse HVAC, and if it did cost $3.5 million, we would have to save up about 14 years and do absolutely nothing else at the funding rate that we're at to replace just that system. And that means the other 20 items on that list for the next 10 years, there would be no funding to put away for roofs, for any other building maintenance of large expense, kind of like the jail painting that you just saw here today. So there's money set aside for them. One good example is the price of things, as everybody knows, even in the audience, everything's going up. We had the fan coil units for this facility in the capital project, and when Greg went out for bid for that, it was about 3 times more than we anticipated because the prices increased so much, which basically, instead of it being he was gonna try to do a third of them a year, we'd basically have to do 6 of them a year and then push everything back in those 6 years that we had scheduled to do to allow him enough funding to do that. So all these have to be done. I know another good example, if you don't do that in this building, if you walk around the building, you'll see a lot of the ceiling tiles that need to be replaced, and the commissioners have asked about that. We don't replace them because the fan coil units leak and they stain the ceiling tile, and the ceiling tile also costs money. So the farther you push, or we let these projects go down and call it deferred maintenance, whatever you want to call it, the projects still need to get done. The longer we wait, the more expensive they're gonna be.
Okay. Do we have any unrealized properties or anything that we would need? Maybe we've got property that we have or have ownership in or stake in that we could let go?
We do have 4 identified pieces of property. There's one at 240th and Antonino Road. That's where the old Highway 40, there's a little patch right there. It's a couple acres. A very similar property located south of Pfeiffer on those curves that are there. A very small, I think Neil's aware of it, a couple acres down in Shinshin. And then I wouldn't say a property even big enough in Victoria. Those are the 4 properties that we could relinquish with that. But that would, I mean, we're not talking
That's,
anything even to
Nothing
do a
significant.
couple fan coil units. We're not gonna get much money out of those 4 pieces of property.
okay.
Now, what could be is if you did the EMS facility in several years, that, although also probably not the most attractive building that's attractable to sell, but that EMS facility and the fire facility, you could sell those 2 properties to help offset some of that expense after those would be vacated.
Okay.
I know when I talked with you last night there that, about prioritizing, I had the same thought, you know, where do we, but it's all hitting at once. And like you said, it's very expensive. Everything you touch is expensive.
I know this ties into our budget discussion that's coming on, and I know we've been having these discussions over the course of the year. It impacts county property taxes. That's what it all comes down to. And we only have so much area that we can go. We can't, it'd be nice to say we have a quarter land somewhere that we could sell that's worth $7,000, $8,000 an acre to offset some of these expenses, but we don't really have the accessibility to gain any other revenue to pay for this, or other than ad valorem tax and the sales tax. And the sales tax is capped by the amount of money that we receive based on the expenditures that is within the community in a given year, which we already realize about 95, 97% of what those annual revenues are for sales tax.
Okay. Where does this put us, kind of long-range projections? We've just replaced the EMS building HVAC system. We had to upgrade it. We just got done putting in a generator with the sheriff's office. I mean, we've done a lot. So, I mean, the COVID dollars came in. We did a bunch of work then. Are we grouping too much together by doing some of these projects now and setting future commissions up for having to do it all again in 20 years at the end of life expectancy?
Yeah, you can never can say what you can expect a commission to do in a facility that could last 50. You know, the EMS facility that's in Ellis now is already built in 1970, and it's been used since the 90s, I believe, when the county took over the service. What could be in 30 years? It's kind of, Commissioner Younger made that comment. You do so much at once, you know. I think the commission that we have now, and patting your backs a little bit, you've done a great to work with the department heads to identify the capital needs that are out there, and started to find approaches, not just with road and bridges, but with the facilities and the maintenance that is taken care of. But you don't want it to be in a situation where you have everything at one time, and then but The HVAC, the fan coil units in this building, they won't last another 30 years, like the same as a new EMS facility over in Ellis, which could last 50 years. No idea what the population of Ellis could be. They could have a huge boom and go from 2,000 people to 10,000 people, and one EMS facility could have to be turned into two.
Okay. What does this do if we do a bond? What does it look at, like if we need to do, if we say we do a bond for this and we get our information back, we're not approved for a grant over Saline River, and we need to bond that out, because we've all identified that needs to be done. Something has to be done. So does that affect our bonding ability for roads and bridges?
No, that would have to be two separate bonds. And I don't know if Bill wants to explain a little bit further, but bonding limitation is basically, I mean, it's a financial policy essentially for what we want to encumber ourselves with on a bond repayment schedule. But the buildings have to be a completely separate bond that goes through the Public Building Commission, funded by the county. They would have to be grouped together, and if you decided to do a different bond for the, like, say, the 12th Street Bridge or the 10th Street Bridge in Ellis, the Saline River Bridge up on the Saline River, that would have to be a completely separate bond. They can't be linked together
Okay.
by statute.
The current bond we have, what was the original amount on that?
It was roughly just over $5 million. It was a 10-year bond. I always joke, we probably should have bonded a lot more back then. Our interest rates were less than 1% back in 2020. So bonding a lot more back then would have been beneficial, but that was a good example of what Commissioner Liker just said. That was for road projects that we had, mainly to help fund the Northwest Business Corridor on the northwest part of Hayes there. But that is set to expire in 2030. And the goal for if we were to consider, and I know we're not asking for I guess we could make a decision today, but the goal would try to keep that bond payment about the same as what that PBC or the GO bond for the roads are. So that way, when that one expires, this one basically just slips in over it and would continue on for the last 10 years at roughly the same amount.
Is there any capacity to pay it off early? Low interest rates, you may not want to anyway, but
Yeah, you'd be better off keeping money invested with the Treasury right now at 5+% with Vern rather than with the PBC bond that we have with the yields and everything. It was less than 1% that we're paying on interest on those bonds. And there's roughly, I just looked it up, just under $3 million left on that bond. So we wouldn't have the budget authority and to do that necessarily. We could put it in the budget for next year, but how do you, that would be a mill levy impact, tax impact, unless you deplete all your reserve funds.
to go over that financing again potentially, so if we were to do a bond, say, for 26, we would encumber those funds but we wouldn't start projects till later, so it wouldn't impact our 2026 budget.
Correct. So it gives us more time. I like to have a lot of time to talk through these, have the commissioners have all the information, all your questions answered. If we were to bond it out in the first quarter, or if we were to sell the bonds, release them for sale in early 2026, that whatever that dollar amount would be, let's just say $8 million, we could sell the bonds, we could gain the $8 million, put it into a bank, and Vern could invest it, the county treasurer could invest it, and he estimates on it that $8 million with the rates about where they should be at that point would gain about $250,000 in interest, which would help the overall mill levy because we could capitalize that $250,000 and put it into general revenue, or you could add that $250,000. Essentially, like what the school district did, they took a $143 million bond out And that money gained interest, and over the years, instead of just doing 143 million, Bill probably knows these numbers a lot better than I did, or I do, but that, they capitalized on that interest, so they used that interest to do more projects and have more money available to do projects. That's a lot bigger scale than what we're looking at here, but there's two different ways you could look at that. You could put it in the bank to save it for the first interest rate, or the first year's payment, which would pay about 50% of the first year's payment. So many different ways on how that could be worked through on the backside of things. But if we were to call the bonds for sale in early 2026, our first payments wouldn't be made until 27. So we could also stair-step the budget to accommodate for those payments as well. We also have sales tax that when we collect the county general sales tax and the county healthcare sales tax, I keep those in a completely separate fund, so that way where it's 100% transparent to the public how much money we get and how much money and where it gets transferred into the general fund. The money that's left in those sales tax funds could also pay for those bond payments for the next 3 years until 2030. And then it would have no impact whatsoever on the county general mill levy taxpayer. So that way when the 2020 GO bond falls off for the roads, we would pay for it now with the new bond, with the old sales tax dollars, and then 2030, one would go away, the other one would step in its place, and sales tax would continue to pay for this new bond. It would have essentially no impact on the county general budget.
You remind me again when the sales tax is set to expire.
That's gonna be a big project for us in 2029 to start advertising, doing it. I would suggest doing a lot of what we did last time, but in 2029, start having those discussions as to what those new sales tax may look like. I know the commission is very interested in trying to work with the county citizens to see if there's the interest of using the sales tax more, a higher sales tax to reduce the ad valorem tax that people pay, property taxes. There's a potential that if we did essentially the same thing, that we could have I would say, a significant decrease in property taxes. The good thing with that sales tax discussion is, according to the Ellis County poll factor of the state of Kansas, we're in the top 5 in the entire state, which means the sales tax that we collect, a majority of that money is collected from non-Ellis County residents, people traveling through, coming into ball games, different things like that. So the sales tax would go up, but the more of the money that we collect are for people outside of Ellis County, which would then help reduce the property taxes for Ellis County citizens. Those discussions on how that would actually look like would need to, we can continue to start having them now through 2029. But that sales tax does expire in October of 2020 or 2030. So we would want to have that vote in 2029, so that way we could plan for the 2031 budget accordingly with what the sales tax would actually be. Currently, I guess just for information, since we're talking about sales tax, the money that we do collect on sales tax offsets just about 6 mills in property taxes that would have to be paid to fund our budget the way it sits now.
And like you said, a lot of the out-of-town people are paying for the majority of that.
Correct.
We do it when we go out of town, if you look at your receipts, so why not? I like it because of the oil is down, as everybody knows, unless there's gonna be a big boom again. But yeah, we need to just keep educating everybody on it, how it works and what it's done. And you did a good job of saying it, so.
When it comes to discussion over an EMS building and possibly expansion and stuff over in Ellis, just because we're looking at this now from our standpoint, that doesn't mean we can't coordinate with the city on this project as well as the bridge project that we've already talked to them about. So that way they would have some input and possibly some financial burden on it as well.
There could be some considerations which we've had that discussions with, and if the commissioners would, if your intent is to want to proceed with this, I would work with Danita, myself, and even if a county commissioner, I know that's Commissioner Burgess's district, but we could start scheduling meetings to have meetings with their staff and see how or if they would like to participate, because just as we're trying to sit here to plan what our future looks like, they do the exact same thing for the city of Ellis, and the earlier we can start having that communication with them, that EMS facility probably wouldn't be until a 2027 project, but the more time we have would also benefit that conversation, and I'm pretty sure the city of Ellis would appreciate that as well.
Okay. I think that would need to, I think that should be done. I don't want to step on toes. I mean, I think that they should have some input at least on it.
Mhm.
I guess I think it should be considered, especially since it's really not a financial impact on our, it's not, we'll get to some things that might impact our budget, but this really, I think we should consider it since it doesn't really impact our 2026 budget, allows us to continue to talk about it, to figure out if these projects are worth doing. And there seems to be a pretty straightforward financial path to complete them without much impact. So to me, I think we should consider it through our budget process, whether we end up doing it or not. We still have time to work that out, but.
Well, I think by pre-planning and right now we don't have any catastrophic failures that has to be addressed immediately. I think by planning for this, we could better set ourselves up for success.
Yeah, it's one of those things I told Darren, it's one of those things where we kind of identify, which say the HVAC, we've identified it as needing maintenance at some point. It's working now, it'll get us through, but if we don't address it and it fails in 3 years and we don't address it proactively, and then we're forced to do something, I think the community and the public would say, well, you knew something was wrong with it, why didn't you do something in 2026 about it? So that's kind of my simple take on it is, we hear that quite often is, why didn't you maintain something, or why didn't you, if you knew something was going to be a burden on you later in the future, why didn't you address it sooner? So I think that's kind of what this is trying to do, is be proactive with some opportunities, and again, potentially doesn't have much impact on our 2026 budget, if any at all. So I think it's worth considering.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
like you say, the EMS in Alice, same way, we know it. Everybody knows that the vehicles are getting larger and more capacity in them, more stuff to save lives. Yeah, we need to get on this. And 1970 is a long time. I mean, it's done its thing and then some.
Well, it helps us on another regards. You know, I know Danita's looked at rechassing some different ambulances.
Mhm.
Those, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Danita, they don't fit over in Ellis? The rechassis style? It will? Okay. But I know it's some of the shorter ones, we have to watch which ones she does to put in over there. So, you know, it would allow for us more flexibility with our equipment that we do have.
And that is one of the 18 services that we provide for our community, so.
I think it's worthwhile considering.
Moving on then, next item, 2026 second draft budget. And continuing, Darren, more discussion here.
Correct. So the next part of your budget is just the updated budget that you saw on your commission agenda in early June. That was very draft, and although it's fairly similar, we have updates in regards to what we know what the expected increase is for our property and vehicle equipment insurance. And all the updates from any new employees that have been hired in the last couple months, because that was put together in late May. So the early June meeting, the commissioners saw that, and we've heard from the outside agencies since then. We've had several other discussions in regards to what other impacts there are for the county for the coming budget year, and wage and benefits, several different items that the commissioners kind of asked me to bullet point out when it gets to this point. We do have one more month left within the budget. budget process before we actually publish it and having the revenue neutral rate, budget hearings, et cetera. But the earlier we can start making some of the decisions on these items that are to be considered within the budget, the easier the next couple budget meetings happen, or will happen with the staff at these meetings, but also next week, which is July 21st, we're having our budget hearings with all the department heads and elected officials. So anything that we can help you determine yes or no, or how much, we can focus more on the rest of the budget as we progress through the next month. So as you can see, there are several bulleted items within the agenda item to discuss, and I'll just go through them, and if we can get consensus from the commission whether yes, you do want to include it in the budget, or you want to eliminate it or postpone it, and maybe think maybe this is something we can reconsider next year for 2027. I would appreciate any input, so that way we can continue on getting our final budget dialed down to what you would be voting on in early September. So the first bullet point there, you heard from the Wage and Benefits Committee about a month ago. This is a request from the employees to the Wage and Benefits Committee to the Commissioner to increase to a fourth tier on the 401A program. What that is if it's a retirement match account. If the employee would put in $60, the county would match it up to $60. Currently, that max right now is $40. If the commission were to consider this, and if every single employee that's at that $45 tier would move to a $60 tier, that's roughly a $40,000 expense that would have to be built into the budget. So is there any thoughts on that one?
What percentage, just guessing, is wanting to be involved in this, that is really interested?
I would say a high percentage of those that are at 45, because a lot of those that are at $45 already are already contributing more than $45. So I would think a majority of that $40,000 would be needed.
Okay.
We've put a lot of effort on our employees, and we've done tiers, we've done a whole new pay scale, we've done COLAs. At this time, I think I would be on the side of pushing this to another year, we've already done a bunch on our other adjustments.
Yeah, I'd probably, I guess, agree with that at this point, to just delay that a little bit, while personally I think it's a really good idea, and you should max out and match if you can, but yeah, we're getting to a point where we got to kind of figure a little bit here, so.
Like I say, save today for tomorrow, but maybe we can revisit that in 27.
And maybe I should have started the conversation a little bit, maybe with the end in mind of where we're at with our budget. I know the goal is to keep property taxes as low as possible, realize that there are needs that are there that need to be funded, realize that there are cost increases that too much of what some think we can't negotiate some of the items that we pay for. So we're stuck with those cost increases. But currently, right now, the way the budget sits without any of these items in here, for the majority of the part, they're not in the budget. So we're already looking with the outside agencies of about a 1 mil increase. Adding any of this stuff in there, it will be on top of that. So not going to make your decision-making process here today any harder, but like I say, thinking with the end in mind, these do add that financial burden to the county budget. The second bullet point is, don't really have a dollar amount with, but I've had a couple conversations with the commissioners since the Roosevelt fifth grade teachers came in and visited with the county commissioners, that there seemed to be a little bit of interest of maybe putting some money aside to promote that civic engagement with those school kids in the future budget. So, like I said, there's no dollar amount, but this is something that I think if the commission wants or knows you want to do next year, it's either best that we budget for it, or each year look at the end of the year when it's not budgeted and use contingency or any remaining budget authority that could be had to donate for that project.
I would be in favor of, if we had some contingency left over, I would be in favor of like a $500 donation for that, out of contingency.
Because I know when I visited with some of them there the first time, they weren't entertaining a whole lot. They just wanted something to help out and to get everybody in our community on board. And if everybody would do that, they could come out with a pretty good nest egg and help our kids out, get them ready for the future.
Yeah, I think it's a great program, so I'd like to help fund to do something a little bit for it, just because again, we advocate a lot that we need to learn more civics younger and be involved in these kind of programs. And to me, a good example, we just saw it, the governor came out for the water conference, and they advocated very heavily about how Hayes in this area has been teaching our kids about water conservation through years and years and years, and how that's really impacted. And I see a program like this, teaching kids civics locally, is can kind of have that same outcome. So I would like to see the program expanded a little bit, and that's kind of, I guess, my general thoughts. It's just Roosevelt right now, but if it could be included with some of the other schools, the Ellis School, Victoria School, or something like that. But overall, I think it's a really, really good program for kids. So I'd like to see something supportive.
Yeah, when you get a teacher that's teaching kids how to sign their name instead of typing it, there's some value there, and kudos to those teachers. And it gives them kids a kind of a mind thought of how money works, and when there's nothing at the end, and then they're going, where did I go wrong? So good teaching. So
Is this something that we use possible contingency if we do this for 2020, if the commission decides to do this for 2026 and not actually put a budget line item in for it, since it's such a small amount?
mhm.
And then that way you have the flexibility of, you always have the flexibility before it could be paid, but it's not actually budgeted for. It's just if we have
Right.
remaining budget authority at that point.
Right.
Okay. Next topic for discussion, you heard from the Care Council in regards to the outside agency funding. They did keep that funding request as matched with the 3/10 of a mil equivalent, which was $160,995. However, some of the agencies that are more directly tied to the county or have some type of statutory requirement, the county does fund some agencies. They did have an increase. Overall, we're looking at almost a 16% increase in funding from $1.2 to $1.4 million. That's shy of just under $200,000 increase. But some of those in for discussion are the High Plains Mental Health. They've requested an increase of about $76,000 to $75,000. Historical Society asked for another $40,000, and Access Transportation is increasing their request due to their hardship from $50,000 to $111,000. So, is there anything at this point where you would like to make a determination as to, yes, this needs to stay, no, we need to reduce?
Well, when it comes to the High Plains Mental Health, if Sheriff would come up, I'd like to have Sheriff's opinion on a couple things.
Scott Brown, Ellis County Sheriff.
The request from High Plains is for the Crisis Intervention Center, and it's on a per patient fee scale, more or less. Sheriff, could you give a little insight on how crucial this intervention center is going to be?
Yeah, I can give a couple of examples. So I did speak with Darren about this prior, and I was actually going to send you guys emails in regards to my thoughts in regards to this, but I think this is better and the public can hear it. Unfortunately, when we don't have a place to go, large state, is booked. The other day, we were gonna send someone, we're 14 out. 14, and that's an undetermined amount of time when those beds clear up. Those people are in our facility that are mentally ill because we can't have them on the street. There's no place to put them. This will allow us to have a facility to get them in a more timely manner. Maybe there will be some backup depending upon their numbers, but it won't be 14 days. It won't be 20 days. Secondly, it gives us the opportunity at a closer location also to where they get stabilized. And then if they need to come back to our facility because of said crime, which is highly improbable, they also get a counselor there. This facility will keep people out of our jail. For example, we had a lady, and this is, the public needs to know this. We had a person in our cell, one of our cells, our safety cells, that was naked for 2 weeks, walking around because she needed mental health, and we could not get her into the facility. It's really unacceptable. That poor lady. And not to mention our staff who has to deal with it. Several months prior to that, we had a naked guy walking around our facility for a week or better within that same cell. That is just really, again, unacceptable for them to have to do that. And this particular request is needed. It will not only help us as the Sheriff's Office, it will help Hayes Police Department, Ellis Police Department, Victoria, as well as our surrounding counties. Because every surrounding county around us also, and I know they all have to have buy-in in this. That's not my point that Ellis County should fund that entire thing, but we're one of the bigger users of it, will be of that system. I think this is absolutely needed, and I would strongly encourage you to support this so that we can get these people the care and need that they deserve.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet.
Part of the community impact, as the sheriff says, is also sometimes they have to be held essentially at Hayes Med because they're admitted there, but there's nowhere else to go. We have to send sheriffs up to get them or bring them back or take them there, and so that also has a community impact when they're at a facility that's not adapted to help, other than just to hold them. And then
This line item for High Plains Mental Health is, while it's one line item here, I think we'll see some savings, maybe not to the same dollar amount, but I think we will see some savings long-term in other departments. I'm sure, and she had to step out, but I'm sure EMS will see some savings there as well, because a lot of times, and they're gonna call EMS to help transport. So we can put our resources to the people to other people. These people need it, but we can move it around as well to the rest of the taxpayers. So I guess from my standpoint, again, it comes back to the way that number was figured was the number of people or potential people that center would house or hold on a per patient charge. So this is how many people, and forgive me, I don't know the exact number, but this is how many people they currently help and would expect to go into this facility. It's just the charges that would come with it. And it's the same rate per person for every surrounding county that would do it. So every county has been asked to give accordingly.
Yeah, there's no reason any of our staff should have to witness that, someone walking around humiliating. Not only that, the increase that they're asking for, that's a lot cheaper than a new jail. You're talking 30, 40 million. We're already up to, with the school and everything. So I definitely support that because I think it's going to get worse. I really do.
So I guess from my standpoint, I would be in favor of leaving that number adjusted as is.
Historical Society's request from 100 to 140,000. that something we wanted to consider in the budget, or keep, their funding level for 25 is 100,000?
She's done a great job.
She has.
However, it's part of our duty to kind of maintain stuff, so I would leave it at the current funding level.
I'm also good with that. Leave it at the 100. Because I believe when my first year, I think it was like 75 or 76, so, but like I say, she's done a good job, and they do fundraising, and so they're helping themselves. It's not like we're just throwing it out there to them and they're wasting it.
I mean, and if there's other places that we could
Could.
help potentially,
Right.
you know, we've done in-kind things for
Mhm.
other organizations and stuff. If there's places like that where we could help, I would be okay with looking at some of those, but as a
Sure.
budgeting item, I think leaving it flat for the current time.
And then I'll put a note to keep that at 100,000.
Okay.
And then access transportation, you've heard the request from their budget proposal for their federal funding cuts that are happening within their organization. This one probably will take some more discussion. I know that there's some conversations on the city side, because the city of Hayes also helps fund access transportation. But their request at this point, for this year is 2025, but their total request to fill their gap for essentially a one-year period and not anything after that. It could be worse in coming years. Their new request is 111,000, so that's a $61,000 increase for their budget. Is there any quick thoughts on that one, or should we table that one for as you gather more information?
I would move to, I would suggest tabling it. I think I need more information before I can make any decisions on that.
Yeah, this is gonna be tough, and we're gonna have to kind of see what the city's gonna do too, as far as if they're gonna fund and get it to the point, because there's, the tough thing about the access is, even with the amount, even if we were to fund it fully and the city fund it fully, that still may not keep it running for the whole year. So it becomes kind of a question, are you throwing good money after bad? And if the city doesn't do what they're supposed to, and we don't, or we do, then it really doesn't. So it's kind of, I don't know, yes, there's a little bit of talking that we still kind of have to have. I've met with a couple of the commissioners for the city to see where they're at, and I think we're kind of at a point where they're kind of seeing what we want to do, and we're kind of wanting to see what they want to do. So it's going to be kind of hard to break that at this point and see.
I think we need further discussion on it. I don't know if there's alternatives out there. I mean, you know, access is the main need, but I don't know if there's alternatives for things to happen or help with, so.
And we heard it from them that, you know, raising the price doesn't help any, so.
Yeah.
And the access vans are so much more expensive. Like, again, here we go with the, everything you touch is very expensive.
Okay, we'll table that one for a
Yeah.
little bit more early August discussion on that. Give us a couple more weeks. The next one is not a lot of information, but as the commission knows, the district courts, when somebody goes to trial and they select to have a court-appointed attorney, Ellis County has to fund that. We have 5 court-appointed attorneys that the courts can choose from. I met with them, or their representative, yesterday afternoon, so more information will be coming in regards to that, that contract negotiation for those different attorneys. But they are requesting that they get paid more, basically in line for what the state pays for bids amount, which is basically equivalent to if we had no court-appointed attorneys and we had to pay a certain someone else outside of those 5, it would be it's a rate of $120 an hour. So they're wanting to be compensated close to that amount for the number of hours that they put in for their services to the county. So we'll have more conversations on that, but that If that's the case, that's a figure that would have to be considered into the budget for next year at a dollar rate more than $100,000 a year increase for that line item. So just for budgetary impact, that's about what you'd be looking at there for that. Like I said, we will discuss that again in early August as we start working through that process. The next item is for the request for EMS staffing. This will be a topic that Danita will speak with you more on a one-on-one basis next week at the budget hearings. But as you can see within their budget line item, because of the increased call volume that Commissioner Leiker puts out, that does come with increased revenues that we do get for insurance fees that are collected. And the thought process that we could use to fund 3 additional EMS members to restructure their organization for adequate staffing would be to idealize that additional revenue that they're collecting, but also use additional sales tax that we collect for the health department to essentially fund those 3 positions off using the sales tax and their additional revenue for insurance fees collected, which would not impact the property taxes that are collected. And that would essentially fund those 3 positions for the future. So for the reasoning, the explanation, and the one-on-one dialogue with Danita, that'll be had next week. Essentially, if the commissioners were to approve that and those 3 positions would be added, the budget that you see now does not, it does include the additional revenue collected, estimated revenue collected for fees. It does not have in there, however, the dollar amount, which is just over $300,000, depending on if you hire an EMTA, an EMTB, or a paramedic. So it does not have that figure in there. And then it does not have the additional sales tax transfer of roughly $150,000 for half of that to accommodate for those expenses. So that can be done with minimal budget impact in regards to property taxes for 2026. Any initial thoughts on that one? You could say no right away, and then we could just eliminate having those discussions. But I think with the increased revenue that we have, identifying the sales tax that we collect specific for EMS, that addition can be done to provide better EMS care, appropriate care in Ellis County for 20. And that wouldn't start until 26.
Well, I think it needs to be considered. Anything, if we can add that and reduce call times. I hate to say it, when somebody's in need and needs EMS, the last thing on their mind is their property tax. I mean, and I hate to say it that way, but they want somebody there. As soon as they pick up the phone, they want them there. Minutes count, seconds count. So I think if we can do it with minimal to no impact on our property tax, I think is the way to look at it.
But I wouldn't want to tie it directly to, and I apologize that Danita had to leave, I'm not sure why, but it wouldn't really necessarily be tied to reducing call volume or response time. It's essentially they have, on a daily average, we have on a daily basis, we have 4 ambulances, 1 staffed in Ellis, Victoria, and 2 in Hayes. So if Ellis or Victoria go out for a transfer for a response, 1 ambulance in Hayes, then it has to go to Ellis or Victoria to cover those areas. But if one person takes off, because we have PTO, you essentially take 1 ambulance off the street, so to speak. So what this would do, it would be adding 3 more technicians, depending on their grade. It would take the supervisor off an ambulance and put them in a response vehicle. So that way, if one of those other 4 ambulances had something and they needed additional care based on the type of call, that person could go assist and have more personnel on scene. But it also allows the shift of some of those duties to focus on training and education for the changing medical environment that we have. And I don't want to speak too much there because that's Danita's expertise, so I don't want to overstep my grounds, but that's the thought process of adding the 3 personnel, is to add, take the shift commander off a truck, put them in a vehicle to respond to calls. They can QC calls, which means quality control, to make sure the right patient's given the right medication, the right treatment, the right dose of medications, all those types of things, to enhance care, to make sure that we're providing a good standard of care as well. So that's what that project kind of looks like in a little bit more detail.
So does that mean adding another ambulance possibly?
No, so we have 4 ambulances that are in the 4 different locations. We have ambulances that are in reserve, so that way if an ambulance breaks down, goes in for service, they pull that one up, but those reserve ambulances also take out-of-county transfers. But they have, I believe it's a Tahoe that they use, that supervisor would essentially come off the ambulance and go into that Tahoe, and they would be able to respond to those calls, but they could also even go over to Ellis for the day and do training for the people that are in Ellis or Victoria, so to speak. They would respond to that, and then if we got down to a minimum staffing situation, they could hop back on the ambulance to help ensure that we still are more likely to keep 4 ambulances response rating.
And we could do that with minimal impact on our property tax.
Correct. Like I say, your budget already includes not a significant increase, but an increase that we could capture some of it for half of the staff, and the other is we could increase the other half of the, like I said, consider 300,000. We could identify 150,000 of an increased revenue from insurance fees collected, and then pull in another $150,000 from the sales tax each year to get us to that $300,000 mark to offset the expense of those 3 positions.
It's like you said too, somebody takes PTO or 2 of them do, or somebody gets sick or somebody gets hurt in their family and they have to leave for a week, 2 weeks. I think it's a good move to do it and get them trained, or however we get them, what class they come in at, so.
Am I wrong in the history though, but the county used to do that, right? I thought we used to have those shift commanders separate.
I do not believe
Okay.
so, because
Okay.
we've always had 4 ambulances on the street I'm gonna look over there, but
She's not there.
I'm almost positive it's always been,
Okay.
Yeah, the
Been that
5
way.
years that I've been here, no.
the director and the assistant director has vehicles that they respond to. In addition, if there's a call out in the county 7 miles northeast of town, the assistant director or the director can also respond out to assist. I know they do that in the evening hours outside the office hours, when they're at home, they can also respond. Vehicle accidents are the same way. If there's additional help that's needed, we do assist them quite a bit within the fire department, because the fire department responds to those calls. We provide firefighters that are also EMT certified to drive the ambulance, so their technicians could be in the back, but then we also occasionally bring in their vehicles, so that way their higher trained paramedics and such could be in the ambulance, and then the firefighters will drive their vehicles back into town as well, instead of leaving them out on somebody's house or on the side of the road.
I think we need to leave that
Yeah.
included into our
Yeah.
budget.
Like I say, that'll be a more in-depth discussion with Danita next week at the budget hearing, but that's just one of the bigger, or one of the items here for consideration. The next one, also not included in your budget and not necessarily suggested at this point, but it's just as
The discussion is
a
happening.
discussion that needs to happen, but also for a future budget year, is Greg and Keith are 2 buildings and grounds technicians. They have a lot of buildings to take care of. We have $70+ million in buildings that we have to maintain and upkeep. And I think the community has the expectations that we upkeep them in an appropriate manner. But Greg and Keith do not maintain some of our facilities because we try to take that burden on ourselves within some of the departments, but they do not take care of anything out of the fairgrounds. And that's 80 acres of property with about a dozen buildings that still need maintained and care. And we've done a lot to improve those facilities over the years, last couple of years due to some insurance claims. But there's going to be a time that our fairground manager is to a point where they want to fully retire, and we're going to need somebody to take that on. I cannot ask the commission to put that burden on our buildings and grounds department. So that's something that is out there that is going to be needed to be funded at some point, and not necessarily suggesting it here for 2026 unless the commission wants to move on it, but that's something that I just want to keep reminding the commission that that's something that's going to have to be done. It's not just for the maintenance of the buildings. Like I say, there's 80 acres of property that has to be done for events that are held out there almost every weekend of the year. But in regards to the rentals that are out there, that's essentially a business that we run, rent out, and then receive revenue, maintain those, but also scheduling those rentals with the public, whoever rents those. So there's a lot to it out there that would be needed. So any thoughts on that one at this point?
Well, there's numbers that are not completely accounted for because we have fair board individuals that go out and donate hundreds of hours per board member. I mean, there's hundreds of thousands of hours that are donated that we don't see through our budget. The county doesn't see. They see their hard work. They see their input, but they don't see the impact on paper. So realizing that's going to be a big thing.
And whenever there's any issue out there, it's usually fair board members volunteering their time. We had the water main leak that they dug up hundreds of foot of line and redid lines. That probably would have been tens of thousands of dollars in expenses that we got repaired out there for cost, essentially, because they donated all their time. They got equipment donated. They had Public Works bring in equipment to dig, trench. They do save the county a significant amount of money, but you can only ask so much for county volunteers to maintain county property.
Yeah, you can't even put a dollars to it because, like you say, there's hundreds and hundreds of hours that we know some of them, but there's some other stuff that they do that we don't even know about. That, and also that Darren saying that, you know, we had $74 million worth of buildings. Last night I was at the Shenshin meeting and they asked me, you know, what was going on, and I told them that, and you could have heard a pin drop in there when I said we have that kind of assets that the county has to take care of, maintain. Unreal. Greg and Keith do a good job, plus our volunteers do a good job. I can't stress it enough. If you can volunteer, go volunteer. Much needed.
So kind of starting to conclude here, we've had the commission discussion a couple times in regards to some of these projects that I know are in the back of your mind, but some of the items that are coming up in regards to the bond, future staffing needs, and capital needs, outside agency needs, all that ends to the discussion of how it impacts the overall budget. And so part of it at this point is to not necessarily make a decision tonight, or I'm sorry, one of these days I'll get off the Monday evening meetings that we on Tuesday mornings, but does the commission want to consider that 1 or 2 mil increase to help accommodate these now, as well as the future needs of a bond, potentially the future needs of change of staffing that are out there? I know one item is not necessarily listed on here, but the sheriff has been putting off for several years now the transition to go from a 8-hour to a 12-hour shift to help his office. And I do apologize, there's one other item on here that will be discussed with you next week, is the shift of our public safety CAD, computer aided dispatch system, from a on-premise hardware type equipment to the cloud. That's an additional $136,000 that Jeff Ridgway will discuss with you next week. But all that builds up into this conversation that Commissioner Burgess wants to continue having is, do we give us that proactive response a little bit, is to increase that mill levy to help start capturing some of those future needs and eliminate the thought of being restricted and hamstrung and not being able to provide some of those services into the future. The decision of raising the mill 1 or 2 doesn't need to be today. The decision is in regards to the revenue neutral rate. I would suggest, if the commission at least wants to continue having that discussion, whether or not it is or is not in the final budget is yet to be seen. But I would recommend that we do include it if you want to consider 1 or 2 mil increase in the revenue neutral rate. So that way we're as accurate and transparent to the public as possible that it's still being considered. And even if you do add the 2 mils in today, it can be cut out at the very next meeting as we continue to look through the budget process, as you continue to talk to your constituents, have the staff meetings next week. But if the commissioners have a little bit of a consideration of adding that 2 mils, I would suggest having it in the R&R mailing, and then we could always pull it out in the month of August before the final draft, or the final budget is drafted. So that kind of puts those last two points together in regards to the mill levy and then the revenue neutral rate.
Before I have commissioners respond, I know public would like to speak, and Mr. Kennedy has asked to speak, so I think this is a good opportunity for him to come address us.
Thank you. Ken Kennedy, Hayes resident. As I listen to you, I want to just mention something, and it's very difficult, and certainly my comments, I don't want you to perceive them as being critical of the county or critical of each of you. You all have a tremendous task in facing you with costs increasing, but I hope I'm here a little bit to represent we taxpayers. And I think when we talk about the budget, we're talking about our money. We're not talking about a budget. We're talking, the expenditures of a budget is expenditures of taxpayer money. And you all know that. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. But I don't want you to lose the sight of the fact that everyone that pays taxes in this community is affected by a budget increase. Everyone, in some way or another. To some extent, some greater than others, but certainly it affects them. And we all pay tremendous amounts of taxes with federal, state, local, sales tax, and then personal property taxes. And so you add all those up and it starts to be a burden on a community. Now, how you weigh that burden is part of your task, but it's also part of some of our tasks as citizens to say, hey, consider these things. So you probably expect me to be the last person to mention a department you might need, but I might mention you need eCoach, Department eCoach. Now that stands for Ellis County Office of Governmental Efficiency. Now, I'm sort of kidding, but not really. When you think about it, the federal government now has a Department of Governmental Efficiency. The state has a Department of Governmental Efficiency to some extent, and I think locals need to look at governmental efficiency because, in a nutshell, government is always about meeting unlimited needs with limited resources. There's no way to get away from it. When you look at the costs that Darren's outlined here, it's overwhelming. You think $5 million for air conditioning, $10 million for this, $4 million for this. But by the same token, these costs continue to go up, and significantly. But a lot of our citizens out here, if you drive around the community, I don't think a lot of our citizens' wages are going up to the extent of costs. And so it makes it difficult for them. It makes it difficult for them to increase their taxes when their wages are not increasing that much. And many of our community, we're fortunate we have a lot of retirees in our community, and that's a plus to a community. I'm one of those. But many retirees' benefits aren't increasing. A little, maybe Social Security, but not increasing a great deal. Certainly not to the extent of other costs. So I'm asking each of you to consider those things every time you make a decision on another expenditure. And then also, your department, you could ask your departments to look at places to become more efficient. There must be. In a government operation this size, school district, city, all of those big governmental operations have places where efficiency is possible. And I also am the first to realize that wages take up a lot of your expenditures. And I think employees deserve a raise. I'm not here talking about not giving appropriate and fair raises. But certainly, are there places to be efficient? We can always talk about places to spend more money, but can we talk about places to be more efficient? You talked about selling some property, and that's a good idea. There's no reason to have, but 3 or 4 acres is not going to make much of an impact on a budget, but every penny helps. But are there other places that you can develop some efficiency? Reassignment of staff, reduction of staff. It's easy to talk about increasing staff. Is there any place anywhere in the world in your government operation you can look at some reassignment or reduction of staff? And not riffing, I'm not talking about that stuff, but just don't increase staff. But those are just some things to think about. And I'm not suggesting you're not pleased. I'm not suggesting you're not doing your very best and you're trying your hardest and you're representing the taxpayers. You're elected and you represent the taxpayers. But I don't see the room filled up with people to talk about trying to save a penny of taxes. And every time I present, and I think I've presented to you all, and you've been gracious to listen to me for 3 or 4 times, maybe more, and I do the same with the city and the school district occasionally. But I always ask you to make every decision based on you as a taxpayer and we taxpayers. And is it really that important to charge each of us a little bit more to make that happen? And that's the question you have to ask yourself. If you look back at the last 3 years, I appreciate the fact that you all, with Darren's assistance, have been able to reduce the mill levy about 1.5 mils the last couple of years. I believe that's about right, Darren, pretty close. Total.
I have to look, but
Yeah, it's in that ballpark, about 1.5 mils last couple of years. But that was possible for one reason, because there's 2 parts to our taxes. One is the mill levy, and the other is the assessed valuation. And the assessed valuations went up about 16% over that period of time, too. So while you may reduce the mill levy, maybe $1.5 million, which would be maybe 5%, I don't know, close to it, 5%, the assessed valuations went up about 16%. So you still saw an increase in your budget. Now, thanks to Bobby's work yesterday and Eugene steering me in the right direction, it looks like your assessed valuation is not going to go up nearly that much this year. It's only going to go up a couple %. But by the same token, it's went up an average of about 6% a year over the last 3 years. So you've had a tax increase, revenue, on your side's revenue increase, on our side it's called a tax increase. So you've had some increases, and is that enough? That's the question. So if you raise the mill levy a couple mils, you're actually going to increase taxes. When you look at the assessed valuation and the mill levy combined, you're going to increase taxes this year in the neighborhood of 7.5%. Now, is that fair? I don't know. I think personally, I think it might be a little much based on what we've seen happen with assessed valuations over the last few years, and they've been significantly increasing. So I'm just here to mention those things to you, and I didn't bring I could go through your budget analysis, but I didn't do that. I trust Darren does a great job. You each do a good job looking at it. It's not my job. But I would make one offer. There's 3 parts to every budget. And I've explained this to you before, and I won't explain it, but I'll just say 3 parts to every budget, and that is adequacy, efficiency, and equity, meaning fairness. Now, you're never going to have enough. Adequacy does not exist. It doesn't in any budget. You can listen federal, state, local. It's never quite enough to do everything you want to do. But you don't have to do everything you want to do. Sometimes you have to do the things that are necessary. And that's where the line needs to be drawn. So I encourage you to focus on efficiency whenever possible and every time possible. And if you ever need a volunteer for that duty, I'm ready to go. No, I'm just kidding. but focus on efficiency as well as the needs that you have. So with that being said, I appreciate all you do, and I'm going to compliment the county. I mean, I travel the roads. We have some land in this county. I travel the roads a lot, the county roads, and one of your main functions is roads and the staffing to take care of those, and you do a commendable job with that. And I'm proud of our county. I think our city is wonderful. But again, we're only wonderful because of the people that live here and the people that pay the taxes. And there's parts of this town where some people are struggling. There's just no question about it. They're struggling. And they can't really afford it may only be a few dollars, but some of them can't afford a few dollars here and a few dollars there and a few dollars here, because in the end, that all adds up to money that they don't have for groceries or for rent. So I guess I'm hopefully here to represent them in my discussion with you. So again, I don't know your budget well enough, nor do I need to, but I am asking you to look for ways to be efficient with your budget and maybe not have to increase the taxes quite as much. And remembering, taxes are two-part. You talk about the mill levy on one part and the assessed valuation on the other part. So with that, thank you for allowing me to speak. I'd answer any questions you might have.
I have no questions for you at this time. I appreciate you coming up and talking, just like the last time. We had Mr. Schmeiler in a couple weeks ago, and I appreciate constituents coming in before we set the budget, so thank you.
You bet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Discussion on that then, on what we'd like to consider as far as what we, I guess as far as the draft, the letter that initially goes out to where we want to be or where we start, not where we want to be. We'll end up where we want to be when we go through the budget, but as Darren mentioned, there's some transparency if we send out the draft letters over and then work our way back, as Mr. Kennedy has alluded to us. Maybe we're already at the point where we've made some decisions where we can keep the budget fairly stable without the increase to start with. So we'll take some consideration. I guess I'll start. I'm still of the opinion that we at least consider starting with a 2 increase. And Ken's correct. It's about, from going from 36 to 38, it's about a 7% increase in mill levy, which is about what the valuations have gone up. I think we have a lot of things as we went through, and we went through them without really increasing much, but again, with all the outside agencies and some staffing shortages that we need to consider over the next few years, I think if we set ourselves up potentially now to address that, I would be one to also commit myself to saying if we were to increase it, to stay revenue neutral for 27 and 28, so that way we're doing what we're not padding the budget by doing this, I don't think. I think it's to address needs that we have for the future, and then allow us to address those needs and then maintain our budget for a couple of years beyond that, so that way we're not continuously always raising the budget. So those are my thoughts, is to go ahead and put it out there and be transparent, and then as we work in our budget, we work our way back. So, but I'm open to your guys' thoughts and ideas.
I can appreciate the thought. I understand it. I know I think we're all kind of concerned about direction some of the economies are going forthcoming. I mean, the ag sector is taking a hit. I've started reading articles where there's going to be a significant reduction in ag land valuation, which could come within the next year or two. That'll impact us. Oil is down. Oil valuations are down. That doesn't mean they're forever, because we obviously go through cycles, but I think we're going to be tight. No matter what we do, it's going to be tight over the next couple of years. So that being said, if we increase now and then we see reduction in valuations, and we're going to, just to meet our R&R rate, we're going to add more mills to stay revenue neutral. So that's a concern of mine, I guess, later on.
Yeah, and the big concern and that I have, how are these people, Mr. Kennedy said, how are these people on a fixed income surviving? Like you say, $2 here, $2 there, it all adds up. But then again, where do we come up with the funding? Because sales tax are down, oil's going. You just heard agriculture, our biggest, one of our biggest producers here. I don't know. And there's some other things that we want to discuss yet. Maybe we can get some funding from that we've tabled, just to try to keep it even.
I mean, like I said, I'm not totally opposed to adding it in and then cutting
Sure.
as much as we can to come out and being transparent with our thought process. I
If
would-
you're not overly comfortable with two, do we add one? And that way we're not trying to cut out $1 million, we're trying to cut out $500,000 or something like that.
I mean, that's kind of where I'm leaning, is adding one in there, and doing our best to come in under. I'll reiterate from the last meeting, I'd like us to start looking at how can we get away from these property taxes and work with bringing business in, because, if the business slows and we keep adding on, property tax valuations, it's not great for businesses either. So when the business supports the people, so if they have to cut, there again.
Yep.
I mean, one of our biggest expenses is personnel, and so is any other industry. Personnel is usually the largest, budget item. So we raise the taxes and they cut personnel, then we're hurting everybody twice. I mean, I guess with that, I would make the consideration that we add the 1 mil estimate in and exceed the R&R and list it as such. But also with the caveat, we do our best to maintain what we can and be as respectful with tax dollars as we can.
And kind of to answer what I've heard of Mr. Kennedy saying that, our head departments, God, the 5 years that I've been here, they've been exceptionally well of doing that. Is there room for more? Probably. That can be a discussion that we can have with them, but as you got to talk to Bobby and Eugene yesterday, how they help, so we got some efficient head departments, very efficient.
And it's not so much, can we cut? Yeah, I tell you what, the road and bridge, they're one department that we've watched what happens when cuts happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then the calls come in, this is behind, that's behind. We're just now getting them back up to where they had been. So a cut is not realized instantly. It can be 10, 15 years later, and then you go, okay, now it costs twice as much to fix that. So I guess that's part of what we're trying to do, is to address needs now, rather than, we can make trimming now, but it's gonna cost us twice. The HVAC units is a prime example.
And, as you said, our roads are getting better. You're not the first one that has said that. I've gotten a lot of compliments on our road and bridge. Like Commissioner Liker said, people are noticing it, so we are doing what we can, the best we can, so, and making it safe.
So I guess with that, we've kind of blended in the last discussion topic with the revenue neutral rate agenda item. So for that, what I'm hearing is, with the minor changes that we've done, we've eliminated some things out of consideration for next year's budget. I can update, like I say, High Plains Mental Health's request and Historical Society, et cetera. I'll update that a little bit and get those numbers and just add in 1 mil, which would be designated at this point as a capital expense, because that's where we would direct that funds to that could be used specific for that. And then I can get that issued over to Bobby here within today or tomorrow with those final figures, with where our budget sits at now with that additional essentially $542,000 for that 1 mil. And just for full transparency as well, is that is not a final decision. That can still be removed at any point between now and the end of August when we publish the budget. It actually could be reduced after that too, but it's just for this continued discussion of having it included within what the state statute requires for us to do with the revenue neutral rate. So if that's the commission's intent, I guess with any other discussion would be the suggested motion language that's on the next agenda item for the approval to put that in there, just so it's voted upon.
Okay.
Well, I guess I already kind of made it. I'll move to approve the attached revenue neutral rate letters to be signed and completed by the county administrator to be sent to the Ellis County clerk to exceed the revenue neutral rates for the 2026 budget year for the general and fire department funds.
I'll second it.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? I'm gonna ask a few questions here. You got it up there. So, I'm gonna backtrack on what I was talking about as far as increasing and potential increases, but when we look at that, we got 35.995 to be revenue neutral for 2026 budget. It's just a slight decrease, actually, 35.595. How much would that potentially cut as far as on our budget if we were to actually stay revenue neutral?
Be about $220,000.
Okay, to keep the budget from last year with that. Okay. And then the fire district, interesting enough, last year's levy was 3.817. It would actually be an increase this year, 3.8. So my main question with the fire district, are they actually going to exceed revenue neutral, or are they?
Yes, the proposed budget that you have now, the mill levy is 4.015, so it would be exceeding as well.
Okay.
And I was going to explain this more in detail next week at our meeting, but when you compare the general fund and the fire district, the money comes the exact same. However, a large portion of the Ellis County general fund revenues are from property taxes, not so much oil. The taxes that the producers pay for their oil revenue, it's only about 6%. When you look at the fire district, that accounts for 20% of the revenue. So when the oil has a bad year, valuations are impacted. Next year, as you see, that R&R rate is higher than the current one. That is because the valuation for the county, that means outside the city of Hayes, Shinshin, Ellis, and Victoria, valuations decreased by several $1 million. So when your valuations decrease, your R&R rate actually goes the opposite way. That means to collect the same amount of tax dollars, the R&R rate goes up, so that way you can stay revenue neutral, but you still collect the same amount. It's just the R&R works backwards in that way. That's why you see it this way, is the valuations decreased in the county outside of Ellis, Hayes, Victoria, and Shinshin.
And that was kind of my point for my comment earlier, is we start seeing these decreases throughout the county, throughout these other sectors, our R&R rate, our mill rate is going to increase without us wanting to increase it.
You still would, if you stayed our revenue neutral, you would still collect the same
Right.
amount of taxes. It's just where they're collected from, because you pay oil and gas, you have state assessed utilities that the state does, you have real estate, and you have personal property. Although when oil goes down, you still have to collect that same amount of tax. It's not going to necessarily be from the oil, it's going to be from commercial, residential property taxes and state utilities.
But yeah, the budget stays the same, but the taxes you pay personally have gone up because of your
Yeah.
values. And that's happened actually happened in Greeley County last year. Their property valuations went down. Their county maintained revenue neutral, except they collected more taxes because valuations dropped in that county and taxpayers had to pay. So, yeah, it can happen, and it probably will at some point. That's I guess my argument. I think the revenue neutral requirements are a little bit
Ugly.
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 That's another discussion that
for
we're
another
having there. Okay, I don't have any further discussion or anything, so we do have if there's anything else, we do have a motion on the table. All those in favor say aye.
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 No opposed, passes 3-0. Get to my agenda item. Where are we? Public Works Jobs Description Update. Darren.
So a continuation from the commission's discussion in regards to approval of some job descriptions for the Public Works Department. Commissioner Younger had asked that we add in to several job descriptions some clarity on the ability for some additional staff out there to call in locates for whenever locates are needed for gas, water, sewer, electric, et cetera, into their job descriptions. And then there was identified one in the shop foreman that it needed to say shop supervisor. So with that, we're just bringing those updated 5 or 6 job descriptions back for approval for just the formality of having them corrected and approved by the county commissioner.
I'll move to approve the restructuring of the Public Works Department and attached job descriptions.
I'll second it.
Okay, you got a motion and a second on the table. Any questions or discussion on it?
I also did have a little bit of discussion yesterday with Darren on a lot of these job descriptions are showing, and it's wrote down. So if it's not wrote down, it didn't happen. A lot of the leadership. Well, he explained it very well that all of our employees can also get in on that leadership classes and better theirself for future throughout their job journey. So I like that. So thank you very much for telling me about that.
Motion and second on the table. All those in favor say aye.
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 No opposed, passes 3-0. Fair building rental agreement.
As the commissioner knows, we rent out the Shank and Unright buildings out at the fairgrounds, and to do so, when somebody does rent those, they have to sign a contract. And a recent individual or company that was looking at renting the buildings out there in the coming months was the Rocky Mountain Elk Federation, and they were reviewing it with their legal team in regards to the indemnity clause that we had in there. And the indemnity clause, in their opinion, which I think Mr. Jeter and I agree with, was written in a manner that if something were to happen beyond what they would do or the attendees of their event would do, it also, the way it was written, that they would be held liable for anything the county would do, which isn't necessarily fair to those individuals renting it, to be held responsible for something that the county would do. So it was rewritten in a way that it is, they were held responsible for what they would do as well as those in attendance. And like I said, we worked with Mr. Jeter and their legal team to come up with the new statement indemnity clause that's in the contract for the commission to approve.
This change would go for all who would run it from here on out.
Correct. We would use this new contract.
Okay.
Nothing else in the contract stayed the same. I know Commissioner Liker asked me about fees for the building out there. The fees are the exact same, and with the fair board and with the fairground manager, we'd look to try to annually update those at the first of the year if we do need to increase the rental rates that are out there, which we just did last year. Or, yeah, late last year.
Makes sense to me.
I'll move to approve the update fairground rental contract.
I'll second that. Motion to, second on the table. Any questions, further discussion on it? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
No opposed, passes 3-0. And Mr. Lyle Pantel on fire truck, right?
Before we move, go ahead, Lyle, you can come up. One question, with the Shank and Unright, does this rental contract, does it, anything like that exist with the rodeo arena?
They do have a different rental agreement that was approved by the commission for the rodeo.
Does it have any statements that would be reminiscent of what we just changed?
It's not as in detailed.
Okay.
We did look at some state statute in regards to when a fair board or when the fairgrounds operates. There are some state statutes that limit the liability to animals. If a horse were to get out, if a cow or a pig that are being shown, there are some state statutes that protect like the 4-H kids and the county and the facilities and the fair boards. But I'll bring that rodeo rental contract up, and Mr. Jeter and I can look at that and see if there's anything that we need to change in it.
Okay. Very good, thank you. Sorry, Lyle.
That's all right. Good morning, Commissioners. Lyle
Morning.
Mantle, Assistant Director of Fire and Emergency Management. This morning, I'm bringing 2 new fire trucks to the commission meeting. We recently made a trip to South Dakota on Sunday and came back yesterday with those 2 new engines. It was a lot of windshield time, but the trucks are here, and they're replacing 2 of our older engines within the county. We saved quite a bit of money by doing the purchase of 2 and a lot of time. Currently, their estimate on a standard chassis, such as a Freightliner, is 460-day turnaround time, which could be longer depending on how many orders or if there's any delays with anything else within the system. And if we were to try and get a custom chassis, it'd be over 1,000 days on turnaround, and that's from when we order with all the final specs in place, not including all the planning that goes into it. If you have any questions, I'd be willing to stand for those, but those trucks are out in the parking lot available for you to view at this time. Now, mind you, there is a little bit of work that still needs to be done as far as decals and moving the equipment over, but that's for doing at a later time once our crews have done training on those apparatus to put them safely into service and be aware of how everything operates on them, because there is some differences in those new trucks.
Okay. Very good.
Very good. Did you run them with sirens all the way home?
No, unfortunately, they only get about 5 miles to the gallon as is, and running them hot, that'd really drive that down. I don't think the public in Nebraska and South Dakota and eastern Kansas would have looked upon us favorably if we did that either.
Very good. Okay.
Thank you.
We'll take a look. Thank you,
All right.
Lyle.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lyle.
Come to the end. Darren, you got any more to talk about today?
No, I'll save you a little bit of time. I did remind you this morning, in case you did know, Mr. Jeter could give you a quick update on the tax sale if you do wish.
Yes.
Do you wish?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Bill Jeter, County Councilor. It was a year ago in September that we started the current tax foreclosure legal proceedings, when the commission by resolution authorized the county treasurer's office and myself to initiate a tax foreclosure. We started with 18 properties, totaling $61,834 of taxes, interest, and penalty as of September 23rd of 2024. During this process, we had 15 properties that the owners came in and paid their taxes, interest, and penalty current.
That left us 3 properties, which we had scheduled for sheriff's sale tomorrow. All 3 of those came in last week and paid all their taxes current. So for the first time, we don't have a tax sale from a tax foreclosure petition.
Very good.
So I would thank Vern Reuter and the treasurer's office, and particularly Amanda Shannon, for all the work that they put in. That it's quite an exercise to do one of these, and as you know, we do it every year. So we've got a new list that we're trying to whittle down now, that we will probably be back here in September to initiate the 2025 tax foreclosure process.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vern. Amanda?
Yeah, thanks, Vern.
Neil?
I would, if I could, have Brandon come up and give us kind of a little update on the 48th and the vineyard. That way, whoever's watching can get enlightened on it.
Morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
Brent McKay, Ellis County Public Works Director. So later this afternoon or this morning, you'll be seeing 2 notices going out. We met with staff from Ergon and contractor Bettis yesterday. The plan and intent, we're also moving message boards out, is to start 48th Street on the 17th. It'll be for the 17th and 18th. There'll be a pilot car for those ones. So there'll be minor disruptions, but no total closure. We'd still advise people to use alternate routes when they can. If they're going to shop at a business that's in that impacted area, they need to go through there. But if they're just trying to use it to go around the roundabouts, I'd recommend going through the roundabouts. And then the following week on the 21st is when we are planning on starting Vineyard or 41st Street and Commerce overlay, and that one's going to take 4 days. If that answers your questions on those.
Nope, I just want our community to know, and.
Yep, we'll send out new PSAs. We had sent them out previously, but then the project got delayed, so we had to send out amended ones. So we'll be sending out.
And we had 3 come out this morning already for other projects: Cathedral Avenue, Catherine Air Base, a culvert project, and what was the 3rd one? Bridge deck.
Yep, for
So-
FAS 150 down on Pfeiffer Avenue, just north of Shinshin, or Pfeiffer, sorry. Yeah, we sent those out yesterday at around 11 o'clock, so.
I also did see him on Facebook, so that's good. That's where most everybody looks.
Yeah,
so.
we put them out there, we send them to all the agencies and the radio, so and then they're added to our social media site, and I believe our county website as well, so. We try and do everything we can
Very
to
good.
advise the public of everything.
A lot of projects, a lot of improvement. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Is there gonna be some discussion on speed limit? Because a lot of people have asked me on Vineyard and on Commerce or 270th, are we going to look at possibly a speed limit on there? Like slowing it down?
Previously, when we discussed this, we discussed waiting until after the
Okay.
improvement is done, the shoulders are added, to do the traffic study. Because the traffic study right now, without knowing the future impact, they may come up with that 55-mile-an-hour speed limit, and
Okay.
we'd like, it was decided then, that meeting, to make the improvements, and then for my office to reach out to get a traffic impact study done.
Okay.
They may come back with those speed limits are viable, safe speed for the area, but they may come back less. And then from there, the commissioners would, based on the engineer's recommendations, would have to have a resolution to allow my office to install signs for the sheriff's department to be able to hold people to those speed limits.
All right.
So we can put signs up, but they're not enforceable unless there's a resolution attached behind it. And to make the resolution legal, we have to have an engineering study done and have their recommendations.
Okay.
There will also be temporary shoulder drop-off signs, because there'll be 4 inches of asphalt without shoulders on Vineyard or 41st Street, and Commerce or 270th, depending on whether you're coming from the city or county. For a short time, after the pavement's done, we'll have signs up, and we will be adding shoulders after the pavement cures.
And we have our billboards out on 48th yet or not?
They're moving them out today.
Okay.
We're putting 2 on 41st and Vineyard, on 48th Street, and we're putting 1 on 48th Street, or sorry, 2 on 48th Street.
Mhm.
Got too many roads confused. And then Vineyard and Commerce will have one there until the 48th Street project is done, and then we'll be mobilizing the other boards to try and make it as everyone as aware as possible as we can.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I really don't have a report. I'd just like to reiterate to the public that's here, or maybe listening, that we're having our meetings, budget meetings on Monday. So that is an open meeting. If they have we have a schedule out, and if there's a particular place that they think they want to hear the budget presentation for, they can come. So.
EMS.
Oh, okay, it'll be at the EMS building downstairs in the basement.
Correct. Since today's meeting's over, the clerk's office, probably later today or first thing in the morning, will put out the agenda, but it will be at 8:30 on Monday, 8:30 Monday morning, July 21st, at the EMS facility on 22nd Street, the basement training room.
Okay. And we put in a whole day.
Good thing you reminded me, I probably would've.
Yeah.
Made a long trip around.
But we'll put in a whole day of,
It will.
8:30 till 5 probably, of listening and going through and fine tuning and working through things.
Still got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
Very good. I don't have much. I did attend last Wednesday. The governor came out, was at Sternberg to sign a water committee task force bill here in very appropriately picked Hayes in Ellis County in our area because we battle water issues all the time. We've done a commendable job conserving water, and this task force is to continue to look at statewide water issues now. So I think it's another thing that has just a lot of work. Hopefully it'll improve our situation, but I did attend that, and it's a nice ceremony for the governor to come sign. That's all I have, and we have an executive session.
Okay, I'll say my report and then we'll.
Oh.
If that's all right.
Oh,
Chair.
yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay,
Yeah,
no,
I
that's
skip
right.
over you after
I
you.
also did attend the water task. And if you want to look it up, it's House Bill 2172. And as our chair said earlier, there was a lot of kids there. They really got involved, so thanks to 4-H and whoever else, maybe a 5th grade teacher, 4th grade, whatever it is, but there was a lot of involvement, and she recognized that big time, our governor. So very good to get our young people involved. I also went to the Hayes Community Theater, which I didn't even know what they done, but now I do, and we had a ribbon cutting there. It was pretty nice, and as I stated before, I was at the Shinshin meeting last night. They're flowing right along, so it's good to go there and see that, and I was going to compliment Brandon and his crew, but getting a lot of compliments on just the overlays that we're doing and how our roads are getting, much more attended. So thank you for that. So that's all I have. Okay, I move to the Board of County Commissioners recess to an executive session for 10 minutes under the following exception of the Kansas Open Meetings Act pursuant to attorney-client privilege, except the subject to be discussed during the executive session is contract negotiations. Those attending are the 3 county commissioners, Mr. Bill Jeter and Mr. Darren Myers, and we will go to 10:34.
I'll second that.
Second, got a motion and a second to go into executive session. Any discussion?
No.
All those in favor say aye.
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 No opposed, passes 3-0. executive session at 10:38. No decisions were made. And I'll adjourn the Ellis County Commission meeting at 10:38.